Today, we are going to be talking about how paid media fuels growth loops and not funnels. So, we're going to start off by talking about the fact that paid media is expensive. Attribution has always been quite messy, especially in the last few years of privacy control. And side note on this one, I think Google's done a big U-turn on their privacy changes, which were due to take place this year and threatened to take place for a number of years, but was set to do this year, hasn't gone ahead. But attribution is difficult to get your head around. And then you match that with the fact that cost per acquisition is on the whole rising. Year on year, it's getting more expensive to acquire users. We know that there's a seasonality trend when it comes to paid media and even running ads, right? You're typically looking at Q4 of the year is always going to be a bit more expensive, bigger saturation, much more noisy, right? There's a whole bunch of things. And I suppose on the flip side of that, we know that creative is one of the biggest levers. And if you optimize your creative assets, you can gain the attention of users or your potential users a lot better. And you are therefore going to have better results. Like two sides of this coin. There's the side of the coin, which is like, great, we can churn all these things out. We can work 10x harder to generate the results which make sense for our business. And we're seeing those results, and you know what, it's kind of happy days. We're seeing some revenue, we're seeing these significant actions, investors and stakeholders are happy. Why change this system? We're unaware of anything that's going wrong. And that's that one side of the coin. The flip side of the coin is that these CPMs, these cost per acquisitions or CAC, these are increasing, right? ROI is taking a hit in a significant number of areas. And if you are a scaling business, you've got funds to use and you are not being able to break through the noise, you're going to find this incredibly frustrating. But there is a way to utilize paid media. It's not that you tried it before a year or two ago and it didn't work. You tried it 6 months later, it didn't work. You tried it 6 months ago, still doesn't really work. And you just feel like you haven't got the time to dedicate to figuring it out. Right? I get it. It's cumbersome. It's a full-time job, so it depends on the resources of your company and where those resources are pointed. You may have a marketing department, but they're not pointed towards paid media because there's other stuff going on that helps you scale your business. Fair enough. But paid media can be an amplifier. And if you're ever sat there kind of like wondering if it is worth it, the issue isn't actually typically with the ads that you run or the audiences that you're targeting. It's the system that you have once that ad brings in a new person and how they feel in your environment. So that's what we're going to talk about today. It's the fact that paid isn't broken, right? It's the fact that your system for growth isn't well equipped enough to support your growth, if that makes sense. It's a bit roundabout, but that's what we're going to explore. So let's have this in a very typical way that I've seen a lot of companies run this. So you're driving someone to a landing page, you're hoping for a conversion. If you're doing it that way, unfortunately, in 2025, you're not using paid media properly. You're not utilizing it to the impact that other brands can leverage it, right? And to talk about that for a minute, what happens in those moments where you and let's say 3 of your closest competitors are targeting the same audience or similar audiences, and if their system supports better growth, better results, and the thing is, it's sending those quality signals back to the advertising platform. So let's say you're using Meta, it's sending those quality signals back in the form of events and engagement and all this kind of stuff. If they are doing it better and their quality signals are much higher in quality in comparison to yours, who do you think the algorithm is going to favor? And who do you think the algorithm is going to punish in comparison? You may still be getting results, but if your competitor is getting 10x the results because their systems are better, the algorithm is going to work far better for them. They're going to have better cost per acquisition, better CPMs, they're going to have better retention, LTVs, they're going to have a better time, right? They're the ones that are going to be popping the Verve Clicquot, right? And you're going to be opening up the soda water. That's the comparison that we're making here. And in today's day and age of paid media, social media, what you tend to be doing in that situation is you are basically renting or leasing attention. And as soon as it comes in your door, you're letting it walk straight back out again. So that's the metaphor I need you to focus on. So we are going to talk about how you can go from leasing attention and renting that attention to owning the attention and building a better growth system. Funnels extract, loops compound. So the difference that we're talking about here is pushing someone through a funnel, pouring people in the top of a funnel, expecting them to walk in a linear fashion from A to B to C to D to E to purchase, and then they drop off. That is the linear approach. That only extracts the conversion at the end. You may find people coming back through, but realistically, the funnel is built to extract the conversion at the end. And back in the day when attention was cheaper, that was fine because you can continue pour people in at the top, continuously get people down at the bottom, rinse and repeat, great ROIs, great longevity, low saturation, jobs are good, and businesses were built on that. Empires were built on that strategy. But it doesn't work today. Loops compound. And the reason for this is you're taking that kind of linear journey and you're taking the bottom end of the purchase. And what you're doing is you're basically just bending that around back to the top. The long and short of that is that the output of that purchase is your output of the loop. It feeds directly into a new input, and that could be with a new or an existing user. Okay. If you're unfamiliar with this terminology and what I'm talking about here, go back and watch some of my previous videos. YouTube, Instagram, be able to understand the kind of growth loops and start thinking about the anatomies of growth loops. And then in future videos, we're going to start breaking down and tearing down various elements of those growth loops to support you with your growth. Now, yeah, for linear, we've said that loops are exponential. The reason for that is that the closed loop element of it, when it feeds in, what you'll tend to find is that momentum up. Okay, you get someone in the funnel, they convert, they're done. What then happens is you end up starting again. It's rinse and repeat with no compounding value, and what you'll end up finding and feeling is that you're constantly chasing your tail. So you'll feel this element of trying to close that loop, right? I'm trying to grab my tail, and therefore the loop is closed, but I can't catch it, and therefore my compounding kind of way of building momentum is really difficult. And what you'll find over time, if you can't achieve this, is costs are going up, LTV is flattening or potentially going down, retention is not great. You are still having to buy attention, not just from new users, but from your existing users as well. It feels like an uphill struggle. It feels like you are trying to pull your way out of quicksand, and the quicksand is just never ending. There's a never ending sight of quicksand in front of you, and you've only got that way to go, right? I've been there. I've come from a performance marketing background, running paid media. Honestly, years ago, it was dreamy, right? Identify that your audience is on Meta, or what was not called Meta back then, but up an ad, point ad at users, turn it on, scale spend, scale results. That was really the long and short of it. Now, there's a lot more complexity in it, and it needs to be a lot more fine-tuned and optimized. That's why, again, to beat on this bush, the value of loops is exponential. It doesn't just focus on that one person coming in, it focuses on them bringing in other people with them, that kind of towing those people along. Okay. Good example of this, just really quickly, is how Uber managed to achieve a 12-to-1 ratio of their acquisition, gaining in new users, and then incentivizing those new users with an instantaneous and tangible offer of you invite another person in and you both get off the next two rides. Just so happens that that was a data-driven approach, and incredible opportunity for something that was desperately needed at the time. So everyone was jumping on this, and so really we're just paying once and then enabling that user and the subsequent users to start bringing in more people. So they realistically didn't have too much to focus on with paid media. It wasn't a primary driver to grow the business. They relied on their customers. And that's an example of utilizing paid media as a trigger and then getting that to feed the rest of the growth engine. And that brings me on nicely to basically discuss this next bit about how paid actually starts a loop. We think about paid media as the spark and not the engine. So that Uber example, they didn't rely primarily on paid media to drive their growth, but they used it as a spark to deliver what it is today. right? And they saw very rapid growth of this. And this is a good example of media and product, or marketing and product, going hand in hand with one another. Marketing going, hey, we're giving you the right people to product, and product going, thanks, we're now going to turn this group of people into this group of people. You've done your job, you've done the delivery, we're going to do the scale, we're going to do the multiplication. We're going to find other ways of doing that multiplication throughout the product as well. Keep doing that, don't need to increase spend. That's a fantastic relationship to have. Now, the paid media aspect is the attention grabber. You've got to think about it as the attention grabber. It's got to also set the scene. It's got to cue people up with their curiosity, their intrigue. It's got to trigger an emotion. That's kind of all it has to do. Now, that feels like a lot, but if you're able to optimize your ad to just be that attention grabber in the right ways, at the right times, for the right people, that's all your ads need to do. The real growth comes from what happens after they click. They get into your product, they get into your site. And typically, this is how a growth loop will look. You've got roughly 5 triggers you can measure. Growth loop will typically look at 3 or 4 overall stages, but to get in on the finer details, you're looking at trigger, the action, the amplification, the retention, and the re-engagement, and then it loops around. The re-engagement is then forced into either the same trigger or a different trigger. So you've got to think about how that evolution happens as well. Media plugs in at the top, right at the trigger, as in we are here, you should pay attention to us. But the loop afterwards, the subsequent steps, and then that re-engagement feeding back into the trigger is what makes it or amplifies your growth without additional spend. Like being able to, without saying that we need to spend month on month, or having these big spikes in media spend just because it's bringing results. It will do if you've got it right to begin with. But what if you could still get that growth and maintain it without having to spend more money? So think about it is, what if you could reduce your media spend by 50% and increase your growth momentum by 2x? Isn't that an amazing formula? Okay, so in this kind of get the final sections of this video now, we're going to look at the paid loop blueprint. And what I want to tell you here, and what I want to ask you is, don't start with the ad. Don't start with your creative. Start with the loop. Okay. I've seen this quite a lot. I've definitely fallen into this trap where I've started with the creative. A marketer will start with the creative. What's the creative? What's the messaging? But what if instead of focusing on that to begin with, you focused in on the loop and started asking, what is the loop that we could drop new users into? You may find you have to go to product, the people that build the product, the website, whatever that is, and define a loop and generate a loop mechanics. Very similar to, say, like Uber one that I mentioned earlier, and I have mentioned in previous video. That could be just like a simple prompt, invite your friends and get a like instantaneous and tangible result. Think about where you can drop people in, which once they're dropped in and they're bought into what you do and how you do it, that they are going to actively bring more people in for you. So you don't just want them to convert. You don't want to think about it as a funnel. You're thinking about, how does that person or one of those people bring in another person without us having to pay for it? So that's what I want you to think about. Go away to your product, go away to your team, and map out the journey if you really need to, and think about where is the most definitive trigger that you have right now, and then define your ad as a result of that. A/B test it, experiment it, and then send traffic to it. Understand which of those ads is going to generate that compounding loop. Double down on that. What you will find is that amplification is not then a feature. It actually becomes the flow state of your growth strategy. And what you need to position your business into, or you need to allow your customers to believe, is that sharing Your mission, your vision, your messaging, your idea, your concept, sharing that should not be an afterthought. It should be right at the forefront of your decision making process. And what you need to do is basically make that so obvious that people just want to do it naturally, right? Because at the end of the day, retention is the most undervalued part of paid performance. A lot of marketers don't think about almost like that retention piece while generating an ad. Generate the ad, prove the concept, prove that it works, understand the retention later. Is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And that's fine if you're chasing metrics, but you should never just be chasing those success metrics. It's that someone's beating down on you and breathing in your neck, hey, we need to get new users in, and you just go, that's fine, I can do that. But really, the thing that's breathing down your neck should be, we need to get repeat users in, right? Notice the difference of the use of the word repeat. And a growth loop is going to enable you to do that. So by focusing on that loop first, instead of the ad, you're going to be able to achieve that. And what you're going to be able to see in that respect, if you think about that final step in the growth loop, that re-engagement is where you're actually going to build your brand, is where you're actually going to generate the results which are positive for your business. You're going to be able to generate results which are not shrouded in fear of LTV or lifetime value and user retention. Because you focus on those things first, you deal with those challenges while you're making your ad and while you're making your campaigns. It makes a world of difference. And this is where you are also going to enable your brand, your company to be memorable. Utilizing the right tools and tactics that you have at your disposal. And let's be honest, MarTech tools, readily available, ready to be implemented in a very short space of time as well. You can just unpackage them and get going almost instantaneously. You have no excuse not to be using those types of communication in order to support your growth. And what that will end up doing is turning someone from a one-time buyer into a brand ambassador. And guess what? Those ambassadors are going to continue talking about you. They are going to go out and get you new users without you having to spend time and money on doing it. The beauty of this is that once you build that momentum, acquisition loop in particular is going to work for you while you sleep. And you're, again, the addition, like the cherry on top of the cake here, is that you are not going to have anxiety ridden dreams. You're not going to have restless nights. You're not going to wake up in a flop sweat wondering how much money your ad campaigns have spent, what your LTV and your retention is going to be like in the morning, what your cost per acquisition is going to be like in a week's time, how the frequency is impacting on that metrics going up. All of that is gone. It will be calm. It will be silent. It will be exciting. Okay, fit really for me is I want to talk about the mindset shift for the next sort of 90 seconds. Because going back to that point that I made earlier about funnels or renting growth or leasing growth and attention, you need to be able to build that attention and build that growth utilizing loops. This is a big mindset shift. There's no real two ways about it. It's not always going to be easy. You have to be able to enable your teams to work almost like symbiotically. You have to be able to prioritize the right things in order to get this done. Because at the end of the day, you're building a system. You're building an operating system for your business, for your brand. And we think about that analogy in terms of like, if you were to buy a computer and it didn't have an operating system, you wouldn't be able to use it, right? You had to build your own operating system. You likely wouldn't be using a computer. Very few people can do that. Think about it in that respect. If you were a computer selling company, or think about your product as a computer selling company, if you don't have the operating system to go along with your brand, your products, your systems, then you are going to struggle, right? Let's face it, the brands that win today and continue to win today, they aren't just running smarter ads. They aren't just running clever experiments, actually building systems. If we take Mr. Beast and his YouTube channel growth, might have heard a lot about how they experiment. And on the face of it, may feel like, oh, they're just running a smarter way of gaining attention. And they're just running a smarter way of, thumbnail, which gets the click and the view. And that's wrong. What they've done is they've built a system in the back end of their processes, which enables them to do that output in high quality. They'll have a long list of to-dos and things in their process, which gets them to that point. The thing is, they've just mastered it over years and months and years so that they can churn it out every time and they will generate those results. So this is the thing, to build those processes, build those ads that are going to be the trigger for that compounding element of your growth. You have to build the right system in your business in order to help achieve that. Okay, words. If you're into this kind of thing, this is really just the start of it. We're at the tippy top of the rabbit hole at this point in this series. If you're into this kind of thinking and you want to learn more, you want to be able to kind of go on this journey, then by all means, please do. Stick around. You're watching this on currently, hit the follow button, comment, save the video. I'm here to deliver on this value. Now, the way it's typically going to work, YouTube is for breaking down these concepts. I've got a Substack channel, which is going to tear down the strategies. So we'll give you finer details on the strategies. And then across Instagram, you're going to be able to find more specific and maybe like explanations about how brands do it. So you are keen on following along in this journey. And if you want to understand how brands actually build these systems, then please follow along. I'd love to hear from you. Please drop some comments and questions wherever possible. I'd be happy to provide that information. In the loop that we're building, that you can keep learning. And that's really the final kind of ask that I have of you of this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.